Bonjour et bienvenue à notre rendez-vous quotidien pour la presse, en ligne et en direct sur EBS. Nous sommes aujourd'hui le mercredi 7 avril. First, let me confirm that President von der Leyen is in Amman, Jordan today, where she is meeting with His Majesty the King. Ensuite, nous lançons aujourd'hui à 13 h un nouveau site web sur le sommet mondial sur la santé qui devrait se tenir à Rome le 21 mai et qui sera co-présidé par la Commission européenne et la présidence italienne du G20. Le sommet sera un rendez-vous important pour évoquer les leçons à tirer de la pandémie et pour définir des principes communs permettant de mieux préparer le monde à prévenir et gérer de futures crises sanitaires. Vous trouverez plus d'informations dans notre Daily News. And now over to Johannes, who has good news for researchers who are working on how to fight coronavirus variants. Johannes.
Thank you, Eric. And good afternoon. The Commission has mobilized 123 million euros for research into new variants of coronavirus. The money comes from Horizon Europe, the EU's new framework program for research and innovation, and the newly launched calls are among the very first ones under Horizon Europe. They complement the actions already done. So just to recall, last year we had mobilized 1 billion euros from Horizon 2020 to support research and innovation into vaccines, treatments and tests to fight the pandemic. And the new calls, over 123 million euros, will also contribute to our actions to prevent, mitigate and respond to the impact of coronavirus variants in line with the new European Biodefense Preparedness Plan, the HERA incubator. And as always, we have more information for you in a press release. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. This brings us to the end of our announcements for today, and we will therefore start with your questions. Christian, tu as la parole.
Oui, bonjour. En fait, je voudrais revenir sur un incident qui s'est produit à Ankara lors de la visite des présidents des deux institutions avec le président Erdogan. Cet incident a été filmé, ça a été mis sur YouTube, tout le monde a pu en profiter. Donc il y a un dessin pour avoir mis cet incident sur YouTube. Alors ma première question, c'est où on voit Madame Ursula von der Leyen très surprise. Je voudrais savoir s'il s'agit d'une faute protocolaire. Et n'y a-t-il personne de l'Union européenne qui puisse veiller à effectivement que les deux présidents des institutions soient traités sur un pied d'égalité? Ma deuxième question, il me semble que c'est à dessein que l'on a réservé le sofa à Madame Ursula von der Leyen. Alors, je voudrais savoir si vous considérez que c'est de la misogynie ou du sexisme. Et ma troisième question, je voudrais savoir quelle est la perception que vous avez à la Commission européenne sur effectivement, votre sentiment à la Commission européenne sur la perception que l'on a de l'institution à l'étranger, où l'on considère qu'effectivement, protocolairement, le représentant des États membres est plus important que la présidente de la Commission, qui est considérée comme un exécutant et même pas comme un exécutif. Et ça pose vraiment un sérieux problème dans le rang. Et c'est vrai que Juncker, à l'époque, avait souligné en disant il y a deux présidents, il y en a un de trop. C'était ironique, mais effectivement, ça prend tout son sel aujourd'hui quand on voit ce qui est arrivé à Mme von der Leyen. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Christian, pour tes questions. La visite a été préparée en utilisant les canaux habituels pour ce genre de visite, et notamment, bien entendu, avec l'implication de notre délégation à Ankara. Le service du protocole de la Commission n'a pas participé cette fois-ci au voyage, tout simplement en raison des contraintes liées au Covid, qui font que nous limitons la participation à ce genre de mission. La présidente, clairement, a été surprise. D'ailleurs, on le voit dans la vidéo, mais laisse-moi préciser que, quelle que soit sa surprise, elle a préféré, et je pense que c'était certainement la bonne attitude à avoir, elle a préféré donner la priorité à la substance sur des questions de protocole ou de forme. C'est certainement ce que les citoyens de l'Union européenne auraient attendu d'elle. Il ne me revient absolument pas à moi d'essayer de porter un jugement sur les causes qui ont pu mener à ce qu'on lui offre un type de siège plutôt qu'un autre. Ça, c'est une question que tu devrais adresser aux autorités turques qui étaient bien entendu en charge de l'organisation de cette rencontre avec le président turc. En ce qui concerne la perception de la Commission à l'étranger, ce que je peux te dire, c'est que bien entendu, le rang protocolaire de la présidente est exactement le même que celui du président du Conseil européen. D'ailleurs, la présidente est membre à part entière du Conseil européen et généralement, ou d'habitude, lorsqu'elle se rend dans un pays étranger, elle est traitée exactement de la même manière que le serait le président du Conseil européen. Are there other questions for us on this issue today? Athanasios, or on the visit in general?
Yeah, thanks very much. It's on this issue. You mentioned that the visit was prepared through the usual channels. So you mentioned also the delegation there. So was the head of the delegation aware of this seating arrangement? And if not, why wasn't he aware of the seating arrangement? And what measures are you going to take now so something like that visual mishap doesn't happen again in the future? Thanks.
Look, I'm certainly not going to go into a detailed assessment of exactly who knew what at what point in time. The important thing is that the president should have been seated exactly in the same manner as the president of the European Council and the Turkish president. But as I said, she decided to proceed nevertheless, prioritizing substance over protocol. But nevertheless, let me stress that the president expects that the institution that she represents to be treated with the required protocol, and she has therefore asked her team to take all appropriate contacts in order to ensure that such an incident does not occur in the future. Other questions? Raf.
The Commission protocol, which was not traveling there, is your issue then with the Council, or is it with the Turkish authorities for not respecting the proper protocol?
Raf, we're not making an issue out of it. Let me be very, very clear. You are asking us questions on it. The president went to Turkey with the president of the European Council. This trip had been announced. You may remember that they had issued a joint statement after the VTC that they had with the Turkish president on the 19th of March. Therefore, joint trip by the two presidents naturally should have meant that they were treated exactly in the same manner from a protocol point of view. But once again, this is certainly not something that should overshadow the substance of the trip, which was meant to carry forward a process which was discussed by the leaders during the European Council VTC on the 25th of March. Joe.
Thank you, Eric. Could you explain why you don't have an issue with this? Because your boss, the President of the European Commission, was clearly undermined on the trip, whether it be by President Erdogan or by President Michel, who made a very quick beeline for that one chair. And then just wondering, has President Michel or his team reached out to apologise for the gaffe that clearly made your boss look bad? Thank you.
Thank you. Not making an issue out of something in public is not the same thing as saying that it has no importance. As I just said in my previous answer, the president expects that the institution that she represents be treated according to the appropriate protocol. And therefore, we will be making the appropriate contacts in order to ensure that this is reviewed and that such an incident does not take place in the future. I am not aware of any specific contacts related to this between the Commission and the European Council team at this point in time, but there will be contacts with all parties that were involved in the future. Jakob.
Hi, thanks. Yes, if you could say whether it is true what the Australian authorities claim, that the Commission asked Australia to withdraw export authorizations. We heard this from a spokesperson for the Australian government, that basically Australia had requested, or AstraZeneca had requested for Australia, certain exports, and the Commission asked it to withdraw those so that the EU didn't officially need to block. Thanks.
Thank you, Jakob. Now, you may have noticed that we were discussing the trip to Turkey by the President of the Commission and the President of the European Council. So I note your question and we will come back to it afterwards. So let me be more specific now when I attribute the floor. Are there other questions on the trip to Turkey by President von der Leyen and President Michel? Please only keep your hand raised if this is the case. Catherine.
Hello. So, Eric, at yesterday's press conference, President von der Leyen said that she was looking forward to proven positive momentum from the Turkish side. And in the past, the president has said that she said that only what's measured gets done. So how are you going to, in a way, measure this to ensure that this the positive momentum continues, and how indeed will you prove that? The president also said that human rights were non-negotiable, but there doesn't appear to have been much progress from yesterday's meeting. The president said that she did not convince Erdogan on the subject of the Istanbul Convention, for example. She regretted that the Turkey was ignoring decisions by the European Court of Human Rights. I mean, would you expect these things to be the sort of things that you could measure as evidence of positive momentum? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Let me specify first that yesterday's meeting was one step in a process which is leading now to the June European Council, and that will once again assess the relations between the European Union and Turkey in a number of areas that are set out in the statement. As to the specifics, I would give the floor to Nabila.
Yes, I mean, thank you, Catherine, for your question. Indeed, I mean, as you know, the visit itself takes place in a very particular in a context. The president and the president of the council, President von der Leyen, the president of the council, did go to enhance areas of cooperation where both sides tend to benefit from, provided Turkey shows readiness to promote a genuine partnership with the Union and its member states and to resolve differences through dialogue and in accordance with international law, while at the same time recalling that the rule of law and human rights continues to be integral part of the EU-Turkey relationship in line with the 25th March EU leader statement, meaning that in the statement and in the joint communication, as mentioned in the statement of the EU leaders and in line with the joint communication, should Turkey return to renewed unilateral actions or provocations in breach of international law, the EU will be ready to use the instruments and options at its disposal to defend its interests and those of the member states, as well as to uphold regional stability. there is something that the EU, this is something that the EU leaders discussed and will continue to discuss, and any decision on this matter remain in their hands.
Thank you very much, Nabila. So let's continue with questions on this visit yesterday. Maria.
Sur voilà, les aspects protocolaires de cette visite. Tout d'abord, juste pour comprendre, est-ce que vous avez demandé des explications sur la manière dont on est arrivé à cette chorégraphie? Est-ce que vous avez reçu des explications sur qui a décidé quand et pourquoi est-ce que Madame von der Leyen n'a pas été assise de la même manière que Charles Michel, par exemple? Deuxièmement, je ne sais pas si vous pouvez expliquer un peu comment ça s'est passé sur place. Est-ce qu'on vous a prévenu un peu à l'avance qui doit s'asseoir où, ou est-ce que tout naturellement, quand ils se sont retrouvés face à ces deux chaises, c'est donc Charles Michel qui s'est assis et pas Madame von der Leyen? Merci.
Merci Maria. Je crois avoir déjà répondu à la seconde question en disant que non, cela n'avait pas été porté à l'attention des participants, en tout cas de la présidente avant. Et en ce qui concerne ta première question, j'ai déjà répondu que la présidente a demandé à son équipe de prendre les contacts nécessaires pour obtenir tous les éclaircissements qui sont dus suite à cet incident et s'assurer que cela ne puisse plus se reproduire à l'avenir. Y a-t-il d'autres questions sur le sujet? Oui, j'en vois pas mal. Nikolai.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Nikolai.
Yeah, so it was also announced yesterday that the European Commission will make a proposal on EU funding for Syrian refugees in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. And when will this be proposed? And is this some sort of an extension of the EU-Turkey statement, or is it completely different? Thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. This is a question for Anna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we cannot see you, but we can hear you.
No, I wanted to apologize because my button for the camera is not working. So apologies for that, and I will try to resolve it because I haven't been able to resolve it until now. But at least I can.
Go ahead, Anna.
So, Nikolai. Thanks for the question. So indeed, Nicola, you know that as we have been tasked by the European Council, the Commission will present a proposal to the Council for a continuation of the financing for Syrian refugees in Turkey, as well, of course, as for Jordan and Lebanon and other parts of the region as well. As to the specifics in terms of the funding, this will, of course, need to be discussed between the Commission and the Member States. So we are just not in a position to go into details, both in terms of the level or funding instruments. Again, as I said, this will need to be discussed by the co-legislators. And we know that the proposal, we will come shortly with it, but we're not in a position now to go into the details as to when exactly. We have nothing to announce there. As regards to your statement, I think this is maybe more in the remit of Adalbert, but I think we can safely say that we've said many times that the EU-Turkey statement remains valid and should continue to be implemented fully, and this is actually what we expect. And I think that, you know, on the EU side, we're clearly doing our parts, and I think that the President was yesterday very clear as well in terms of what we expect from Turkey to deliver fully on its part.
Thank you very much. We continue on the issue. Philippe.
Toujours en lien avec la visite. Tout d'abord, est-ce que tu as une explication pour le fait que la conférence de presse qui avait lieu à la délégation de l'UE à Ankara a été clôturée après 2 questions, cependant qu'une dame présente en coulisses disait que, comme les 2 présidents avaient répondu à plus de 3 questions, la conférence de presse était clôturée. Ça semblait un petit peu une façon de brusquer le déroulement des choses. Alors, je ne sais pas si tu as des explications, mais c'est peut-être intéressant. J'ai également une question sur la suite de la visite de la présidente. donc qui, si je comprends bien, poursuit son voyage seul, donc non plus en duo avec Charles Michel, à Amman. J'ai peut-être raté un élément d'explication, mais quel est le propos de cette visite au moment où, par ailleurs, des révolutions de palais semblent être étouffées en Jordanie? Et puis une question qui n'est pas exactement liée à la visite d'hier, mais plus exactement à la coopération entre les deux présidents. Est-ce que depuis la semaine dernière, la présidente s'est ralliée d'une manière plus ou moins officielle à l'appel lancé par Charles Michel et le président de l'OMS en faveur d'un traité international de lutte contre les pandémies à venir? Voilà, merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup pour tes questions, Philippe. Sur la première question, sur la conférence de presse, écoute, je ne suis pas en mesure de faire des commentaires sur la manière dont est géré un événement qui se passe tout à fait de l'autre côté de l'Europe, ou à Ankara pour être plus précis. Donc là, il faudrait voir avec la délégation. Tout ce que je peux te dire, c'est que la présidente avait évidemment un programme serré puisqu'elle partait immédiatement ensuite pour la Jordanie. En ce qui concerne le voyage en Jordanie, qu'effectivement elle effectue seule, bien entendu, la Jordanie est un partenaire très important de l'Union européenne, très important pour la stabilité régionale, comme tu le sais, très important aussi par le rôle qu'il joue et qui a été mis en exergue par la présidente dans l'accueil de réfugiés, et avec lequel nous souhaitons aussi, bien entendu, coopérer dans la lutte contre la pandémie de Covid. Donc, il y a beaucoup de raisons qui justifient un voyage de la présidente en Jordanie. En ce qui concerne ta dernière question sur la suggestion d'un traité de lutte contre les futures pandémies, je crois qu'il y a eu une discussion très approfondie sur le sujet la semaine dernière ici en salle de presse et il n'y a pas eu d'évolution depuis lors. Martina.
Hi, thank you. Just beyond the protocol issue, a bit more on the substance, and the president made a comment about, obviously, the Istanbul Convention issue. Did the incident make her feel that there is make her personally experience the gap in values that the EU seems to feel exists between Turkey and Europe on the matter of the treatment of women?
I'm sorry, Martina, I'm not sure I got the gist of your question. Whose personal experience? Sorry, I just didn't. Didn't understand the question.
Sorry, let me repeat more clearly. She was made to stand in front of two men, one of whom is her, well, who are both her counterparts. And we all saw that looked very awkward. And whether there was a protocol blunder or it was a deliberate situation, did that personal experience in that room highlight for her what she also mentioned in her comments after regarding the Istanbul Convention and the overall EU agenda with regards to Turkey's treatment of women?
Thank you. That is much clearer. Thanks a lot. Well, let me put it this way. The president definitely seized the opportunity to insist on the issues related to women's rights in general and to the Istanbul Convention in particular. As you know, it would have been discussed certainly in any case, but obviously this sharpened her focus on the issue. Other questions on the trip? Regina, please only keep your hand raised if it is on this for the moment.
Can you hear me? Because
yes,
I can't
go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Okay, thank you. Again, in protocol, in the question of protocol, regarding the issues that they were going to discuss, like migration, like mobility, like economical cooperation, which are competence from the European Commission, was maybe a gap between the European Commission and the government of Erdogan, telling them that the person who had the competence was the President von der Leyen and not the President Michel. Because then she should be in the first place, not President Michel, regarding the questions they were going to discuss. And if, again, the same question than from my colleague before, is because Erdogan did it purposely because she's a woman and that's it. And please send my solidarity to President von der Leyen.
Thank you very much. We will definitely transmit your message. Look, I think that on substance, as the press conference showed, the President of the European Commission clearly discussed all of the areas of possible cooperation with Turkey extensively. And therefore, despite the protocol incident that we mentioned, there was a very substantive discussion in which the President played her full role. And she was able to debrief on this extensively during the press conference. Federica.
Yes, hi, good morning. Thank you for this. I'm also following up on the same issue, probably because I'm a woman, and I think as European women, we were very much struck yesterday by the scene that I would even define as obscene. And so on that, I have two questions. One, in the substance, shouldn't be the rejoining of the Istanbul Convention by Turkey a prerequisite for any possible cooperation between the EU and Turkey if the EU and the EU Commission wants to be credible when it talks about human rights and rights of women? Second, is instead on the protocol, which, okay, we know Turkey, we know what they do, we know Erdogan. We didn't know Charles Michel. We didn't know that the President of the European Council could be a misogynist. And so I'm wondering why the European Commission isn't a little bit more assertive and demands formal excuses from the European Council President for not having requested a second chair, which probably was the obvious thing to do, or for having offered his own chair, which was also the second best option to do in that circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Look, on the question of the Istanbul Convention, I think that Nabila has been very clear in explaining what are the criteria that the European Union sees as central to our relationship with Turkey. And this is not about highlighting one specific element to the detriment of others. There will be, I would expect, a global assessment made of the situation in the run-up to the European Council. But what is absolutely clear is that the issue of human rights in general, including women's rights, obviously, is high up there on the agenda of the European Union. On the issue of protocol, I think that in such circumstances, it is extremely important to balance the issues of substance and diplomacy and the issues of form or protocol. The President's assertiveness was clearly on display in the sense that she did not walk away from the meeting. She took part in the meeting and played her full role. I think that that is the best answer that you can give in such circumstances when such an incident arises. And as I have said, she has now asked her teams to contact all the parties that were concerned in the way that the meeting was set up and unfolded in order to ensure that the root causes are understood, that the position of the Commission is clearly explained, and that such incidents do not take place again in the future. Angela.
Yes, thanks, Eric, for the floor. I wanted to know, my question is about the military presence of Turkey in Libya. I know that this was a topic of the meeting yesterday. I wanted to know if you had, if von der Leyen and Michel had any reassurance by Erdogan of a future withdrawal from Libya. Thank you.
Nabila.
Well, I mean, I will recall what was said yesterday about that, but I wanted to say something about the memorandum of understanding, which was discussed, and where we say that the memorandum of understanding is an international agreement which have to be ratified by Libya for it to enter into force. The memorandum of understanding is registered with the United Nations, and the registration does not yet feature in the UN. So for international point of view law, the memorandum of understanding is void.
Thank you. Samuel.
Oui, bonjour Eric. Au-delà de l'incident protocolaire, est-ce que ce qui s'est passé à Ankara comme un incident directement lié aux inégalités entre les hommes et les femmes en politique? Je pose la question parce qu'elle a fait de cette question l'un de ses combats. Et peux-tu nous dire comment elle a vécu cette relégation sur un canapé pendant plus de 2 heures?
Samuel, je ne peux pas te dire comment la présidente a vécu cela, si ce n'est répéter ce que j'ai déjà dit. C'est-à-dire que d'une part, elle a décidé de passer outre et de participer à la commission à la réunion afin d'être en mesure de défendre clairement les positions de la Commission européenne et de l'Union européenne sur les sujets ayant trait à nos relations avec la Turquie. Je crois que c'est ça. Je crois que c'est ça qui compte en l'occurrence, tout en répétant encore une fois que cela n'implique pas qu'elle n'accorde pas d'importance à ces questions. Chacun essaye de répondre à ce genre de situation de la manière adéquate. Il y a une réponse immédiate dans l'instant et il y a une réponse par la suite afin d'assurer que ce genre d'incident ne se reproduise plus. Il ne faut pas oublier que lorsqu'on parle de protocole, on parle en fait de relations entre institutions et non pas en fait entre personnes physiques. La présidente de la Commission est à Ankara en tant que présidente d'une institution. Et bien entendu, c'est une dimension, c'est la dimension qui prime lorsque l'on parle de traitement. Qu'elle était homme ou femme ne change rien au fait qu'elle aurait dû être assise exactement sur le même, ou selon les mêmes arrangements protocolaires que les deux autres participants à la réunion, qu'ils soient eux-mêmes femmes ou hommes. Samuel, tu as une question de suivi?
Oui, très brièvement. Donc, si je comprends bien, elle n'en fait pas une question de sexisme. C'est juste la place de la Commission.
Je ne dis pas qu'elle a jugé cet événement selon un prisme particulier ou un autre. Je te rappelle que j'ai dit qu'elle a saisi l'opportunité pour aborder spécifiquement la Convention d'Istanbul et les droits des femmes. Je pense que le message qui est passé à ce niveau-là est clair. Mais d'autre part, elle est aussi présidente d'une institution et en ce qui concerne le protocole, c'est l'institution et le rang de l'institution et de son représentant, quel que soit son sexe, qui prime. Alain.
Ce qui me manque un petit peu, en fait, à ce stade, c'est votre analyse, l'analyse de la présidente sur ce qui s'est passé hier. En gros, on voit circuler, selon les personnes à qui on s'adresse, 3 différentes analyses. C'est un piège qui a été tendu à une façon d'introduire un coin entre les deux leaders, donc un piège tendu par le président Erdogan. 2, c'est une insulte, tout simplement, une volonté de blesser. 3, un message politique peut-être sur les droits des femmes, les droits de la femme, justement. Je voudrais pas faire un mauvais jeu de mots, mais dire que Erdogan s'assied dessus. Quelle est l'analyse que vous faites, vous, de ce qui s'est passé au-delà des questions de substance avant la forme, etc. Quelle analyse faites-vous? Merci.
Merci Alain, mais le commentariat, c'est votre domaine, pas le nôtre. Ici, nous sommes là pour essayer de faire avancer un processus politique extrêmement important lié aux relations entre l'Union européenne et la Turquie, dans lequel les droits de l'homme en général, le respect des droits fondamentaux et le respect des droits des femmes, bien entendu, jouent un rôle à côté d'autres éléments, eux aussi extrêmement importants. Et la présidente avait à cœur, et je pense qu'elle a pleinement réussi, de porter le message que le Conseil européen avait défini par rapport à la suite du processus. Pour nous, c'est cela qui compte. Et il y aura une étape à venir en juin, lorsque le Conseil européen se penchera de nouveau sur les relations entre l'Union européenne et la Turquie. Tu as un follow-up, Alain?
Parle de commentaires, c'est pas ce que je te demande. Je te demande votre analyse. Il s'est passé quelque chose. C'est pas un commentaire comme ça de café que je vous demande. C'est une analyse. Quel est le message que le président Erdogan a voulu faire passer à Madame von der Leyen et aux Européens peut-être?
Je ne sais pas si un message était censé être passé ou pas, mais en tout état de cause, ce n'est pas un quelconque message qui nous intéresse. Ce qui nous intéresse, c'est que nous fassions passer nos messages aux autorités turques, ce qui a été fait pendant la réunion. Et crois-moi, les convictions de l'Union européenne et de la présidente en particulier sur le rôle de la femme dans la société et dans le monde politique sont extrêmement claires. Elle a eu de nombreuses occasions de les expliquer. Et donc, ce n'est pas un événement isolé, quel qu'il soit, qui va, en quoi que ce soit, changer le fond de sa politique. Athanasios.
This time on the essence of the visit and the Cyprus issue negotiation. And now there are 24 hours after the visit almost. Do we have a clear view of what the Turkish side answered on the European demand that they sit on the table, that the EU will sit on the table of the negotiations at the 5+1 meeting in Geneva for the Cyprus issue settlement? The Turkish side show any sign of agreement to that demand or not? Thanks.
Thank you. I don't think that yesterday's meeting was meant to settle any of the issues that were being discussed. They were there to ensure that the Turkish president heard directly from the European side what are the requests and the expectations of the European Union on a series of subjects. These subjects were then explained in the subsequent press conference. There will be a time for us to assess whether Turkey has taken these requests into account, and it will be the next European Council in June. You have a follow-up, Athanasios.
Yes. So in that case, do you have any indication from the United Nations that you're going to be invited?
For that, I will have to give the floor to Nabila.
I'm not sure you hear me. Yes, on this one, to be honest, I have to get back to you. You know the status that we have when it comes to these negotiations, and so on the invitation, it is. I will get back to you.
Thank you. I have a question from Anna. We are still on the issue of the Turkey visit.
I'd like to follow up on the question of Federica, because I guess it's always easy to point the finger to Turkey, but I'd like to know if the European Commission finds acceptable that, confronted with only one seat, President Charles Michel took the seat instead of waiting for another chair to be brought, or, I don't know, giving his chair to Madame von der Leyen. Doesn't that shows that despite all the priority and efforts of this commission, the sexist mentality is not only a Turkish problem, but maybe it's a more broadly European problem, even inside of the European institutions themselves? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid that I have no comment to make on this. You would have to address your questions to the European Council. The fact is that the President chose a course of action based on the situation that she was confronted with, and this allowed the meeting to go ahead. But nevertheless, as I said, she does consider that these issues are important and need to be treated appropriately, which they clearly were not. Hans.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Just a question on the protocol as well. As some people have pointed out yesterday, in Article 13 of the Treaty of the European Union, there's a list of the European institutions, and indeed in that list, the Council is above the European Commission. And some people, I think the Council as well, have pointed out that there's a certain order of precedence, which means that the President of the European Council is listed higher than the Commission President. So just from your previous comments, do I understand it correctly that you dispute this assessment, that based on Article 13, there is a certain difference in the protocol level? And secondly, I would like to know, have you received any sort of clarification or apology from the Turkish side already? And thirdly, this perhaps for Nabila, there was yesterday also a lot of discussion on economic integration and the customs union. And here, come back to the previous question of a colleague of mine on the Istanbul Convention. Does the European Commission think that Turkey rejoining the Istanbul Convention is a prerequisite for the modernization of the customs union? Because this is not a normal free trade negotiation, but a much closer integration, actually a pre-step for joining the European Union. So that's such a fundamental convention is a must for doing extensive commercial negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. The President of the Commission and the President of the European Council are both presidents of European institutions, and therefore they have the same protocol rank. The fact is as well that you will remember that there was a joint statement by the two presidents of these two institutions announcing their joint trip to Turkey. Moreover, the statement following the VTC of the European Council on the 25th of March clearly gives a lead to the Commission on a certain number of issues when it comes to the dialogue with Turkey, for example, on economic cooperation, on people-to-people contacts, and on mobility. All of these issues were discussed during the meeting with President Erdogan. And let me remind you once again that was another illustration that the President of the European Commission is a full member of the European Council. That is to say, it's the same rank as all of the other heads of state and government. And therefore, it is absolutely obvious that during a joint visit to a foreign country where both presidents take part, they should be treated in the same way. And this is precisely what happens usually during such visits, as I'm sure you will be able to ascertain by yourself. On the second question, I would give the floor to Anna on the customs union.
Hi, many thanks for the question. Han, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah?
Go ahead, Anna.
So, okay, thanks. So I think that you know, we have always made clear that strengthening our already substantial economic ties with Turkey would be mutually beneficial for both sides. At the heart of this, of course, would be the modernization and expansion of the scope of the customs union, as already was proposed by the Commission in 2016. The Commission has, again, you know, already submitted the draft negotiating directives for the modernization of the customs union. By the way, this was in December 2016, as you know, and of course, it will be for the Council to decide on the mandate and the start of actual negotiations. In the meantime, we will also intensify, of course, talks with Turkey in order to see the implementation of the customs union. And as regards to human rights that you mentioned, I think that the European Union continues to be very vocal about the domestic situation in Turkey as regards to the situation of the rule of law and the fundamental freedoms and our expectations in this context. And I think that the President of the Commission and also the President of the European Council made this very clear yesterday when they said that there would be no compromise on human rights and that this was a priority of the relations and an integral part of relations between the EU and Turkey.
Okay, thank you. I will take one last follow-up question on this from Hans, and then I will close the chapter on which we have been now going on for 50 minutes and move on to the question on vaccines. Hans Uwe, you have the, sorry, Hans van der Boschart, you have the follow-up. Go ahead.
Yes, just to ask, I think I didn't get an answer on whether you got any comment or apology from the Turkish side yet, and just also on this protocol question. I mean, Michel always talks first in these press conferences. Does that have any? Is it also related to the protocol here, or you really say there's also no difference between them? Thank you.
Look, I cannot tell you what are the exact contacts which have taken place since the meeting took place yesterday with the Turkish authorities. But as I have said, the president has asked that the appropriate contacts be taken. So I'm sure that this will be the case. As to the speaking order in different press conferences, I have no specific comment to make. What is important is that both leaders get the word. I think that once or get the opportunity to make the points that they want to make. You remember that President Michel was here once in the Commission press room, and on that occasion, if I'm not mistaken, President von der Leyen spoke first. So I think it depends on the circumstances. Okay, I'm now going to close, I'm sorry, the chapter on Turkey because there are other colleagues who I'm sure have other issues to discuss, and therefore, thank you, Nabila. I go back to the question which had been asked on the request for exports to Australia of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I call Balázs, who is representing Miriam today.
Still stepping in for Miriam. Good afternoon. So, unfortunately, no update on the figures compared to what we communicated on yesterday. So, at this point in time, I can report to you the figures that concern the period going from the 30th of January 2021 and the 29th of March. So, during this period, under the export authorization mechanism, 483 requests had been approved and only one rejected, so no change at the moment. We will have updates for you in the near future, but at this point we have to leave it there.
But the question, Balázs, concerned whether there had been withdrawals of requests. If you could go into that, please.
Yes, indeed. So your question, Jakob, if I recall, was whether we were in any communication with the Australian authorities to try and get them to withdraw requests. Now, I think it's important to point out that under the mechanism, requests for export authorization are not made by third countries, recipient third countries, but rather by the pharmaceutical companies that intend to export. And I think in this regard, it's important to add that when it comes to the export authorization mechanism, the rules and the key principles behind it are very clear. They have been explained on a number of occasions, and the pharmaceutical companies concerned are perfectly aware of perfectly aware of these rules and principles, and it is their decision whether, in light of the applicable criteria, whether they go ahead and introduce a request for export authorization. And then, as you know, it's for the member states and the Commission collectively to judge on these requests and take a final decision.
Jakob, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I think you didn't really reply to my question. The question is, was the Commission in contact with the Australian authorities to get them via AstraZeneca? I also said this when I asked my questions. I know that it's not the third countries that request exports. I know it's the companies themselves. But of course, if a country doesn't insist on its shipments being, delivery schedules being met, then that company also doesn't need to request an export. So is it true, as the Australian government says, that the Commission was in contact with the Australian government, asking it to ask AstraZeneca to withdraw export authorizations? Thanks.
Sorry, Jakob, I think maybe I've misunderstood you, but you said something which is factually incorrect. Even if a company is respecting its delivery schedules with the European or to the European Union, it must still, nevertheless, submit requests for export authorizations to third countries, except those which are exempted, or to the COVAX mechanism. So that is absolutely clear. Secondly, we do not comment on the contacts which exist between the European Commission and various actors when it comes to distribution of vaccines. As you can imagine, there are, of course, intensive contacts between all the actors on this issue constantly. But what matters at the end of the day is what are the formal requests which are put on the table of a member state. And once that member state has submitted its draft proposal, its draft decision, the confirmation or not by the European Commission. This is what we comment on. Lastly, let me just remind you that I understand the focus on the European Union, but first of all, the European Union itself is not receiving much more than 3 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccines from the provider. You will remember that the gap between what the company has delivered to us and what was expected up to the end of the first quarter is extremely big, and that the gap between what we would have expected under the advanced purchasing agreement and what AstraZeneca is currently saying it will deliver is also extremely important. Finally, we're not the only region in the world producing AstraZeneca vaccines, and therefore this is a global issue. It is definitely not simply a bilateral issue between one country and the European Union. Jakob, I'll give you one last follow-up, and then we will stop.
Yes. I think there was a misunderstanding. I wasn't talking about the EU's delivery schedules being met. I was talking about the fact that even though technically it's true that Australia doesn't request exports, but AstraZeneca does, of course, it does it on behalf of Australia. So if Australia was accepting delays in order for AstraZeneca to meet EU deliveries first, then of course there would be no need for AstraZeneca to request an export, because Australia would be okay with not getting that export. This is what I meant. And that's why I was asking, was there any contact between the Commission and Australian authorities on that matter? So asking Australian authorities to maybe not insist on certain deliveries being met, which would then mean that AstraZeneca would withdraw its export authorization. And just to double check, if I understand you correctly, you said there have been contacts with Australian authorities, but you won't confirm whether it was exactly about that.
That's correct. Absolutely. I mean, I understand better what you wanted to say, but it doesn't change the substance of my comment. We do not give blow-by-blow accounts of our contacts with all the different actors that can intervene in such a chain. The fact is that what we do communicate on ultimately are the statistics on the requests which have gone through the whole process up until the end, which is the Commission's assessment of the proposed decision by the member state. Joe.
Thanks, Eric. While we're on the discussion of kind of having bilateral engagements with the EU and third countries, can we have an update on the UK-EU talks about potential vaccine cooperation, please? They seem to have gone quiet over the last few days since kind of taking the Easter break. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no particular update to give you on these discussions, which are still ongoing. Once we have news on their conclusion and on any result, we will obviously communicate on that. I see you still have your hand raised, Joe. Do you want to follow up?
Yes, please. Not looking at kind of direct information from the talks, but could you give us a picture of how the talks are happening? Are they very intensive? Are they happening kind of every day, every hour, or are they very kind of sporadic? They will kind of chime in and answer a few emails and maybe a few calls every other day or something, please?
They are as intense as they need to be in order to get to a result. You'll remember that there were a couple of days when the Commission was closed, but nevertheless the contacts have continued, and I'm sure will continue until we reach a result. Okay, are there other questions on other issues for us today? That does not seem to be the case. Thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow here in the press room for a midday briefing. Have a nice afternoon.